Well, good afternoon, investors. Welcome to Election Day Euphoria. It's it's euphoric because today is the day we get our TVs back. I want my TV back, and that happens after today, so that's a good thing. My name is Mark Robertson. I am founder and managing partner of Manifest Investing. I'm a volunteer with the Mid Michigan chapter of Better Investing, and our boss up there is Ken Kavula. Good afternoon, Ken.
Good afternoon, Mark. I'm not so. I'm happy to not be bereft of political ads on TV, but I'll be more happy not to have my cell phone ringing every 8 or 10 minutes. So
Yeah.
it really does help a little bit when they stop calling me, asking me if I've already voted, when my ballot's been in the mailbox for like 2 weeks. So.
Yeah, I sent mine in a month ago, and I sent back a rather snarky note to whoever was sending me the reminder, and I got back a snarky note. So I might have to post that one.
Let, our buddy Len Douglas downriver says he wants his mailbox back. I agree with you, Len. We've killed more trees on this election than I can ever remember. I get these big postcards, these oversized postcards, 3 or 4 or 5 of them every single day, and it's been going on for about 5 weeks now. We happen to live in a quote battleground unquote state, and my goodness.
It's a true battleground. How about you, Kim and Matt? Are you getting messaged into oblivion?
I have, if the phone number is not in my phone, it automatically blocks it. So it screens everything. And yeah, I have more calls that are blocked than ever come through. And then I have had to, I've almost had burned up a shredder because I've gotten so much crap.
Oh yeah. And Matt, you're not in a swing state either, so you're probably relatively unscathed.
We're not a swing state, but we do have a pretty hot Senate race. Ted Cruz is defending his Senate seat, and he is trailing Trump's polling by several points. So it's a different level, but it's there. I would say the other thing is I kept my Michigan. It actually was my home phone number, is my cell number, so I can pretty easily filter a 248 unknown number comes through. That's a pretty easy no, as opposed to it being disguised as a local call.
Well, I'll tell you, Matt, we're getting area codes from all over the country in calls, all over the country, depending on whether it's a PAC calling or one of the parties calling or whatever. But it's stopped today. I did get one call early this morning reminding me that it was election day. Thank you.
These
Is
are
that a certain demographic that gets that call? Like being reminded to take your medicines?
Yeah, they are definitely after certain demographics too. Look at how they're following the football game. One of the political parties is attending a lot of football games for some reason.
Yeah, I'll say that's when I probably noticed it most. We don't watch a lot of TV, but there hasn't been a lot of TV ads. But man, the football games.
Yeah, it's amazing. All right, so let's go ahead and talk some investing. We are going to talk about Tin Cup, Sweet 16, the Buttonwood Bulls. We're going to cover in greater detail next week, but we'll give a quick reminder about that. We do want to talk for a moment about nuclear renaissance. We are going to revisit just for a moment the best small company stocks from this weekend. Ken and I did our presentation on Saturday, and it's gotten pretty good reviews, and people are having a lot of fun with it. And so we'll spend time in a number of these topics. Up at the top, that is a Twitter feed. Apparently, Douglas A. Boneparth and I must have similar interests because I wake up to Douglas quite often when I start my Twitter page up, and I think he's got a fairly decent attitude. Kind of snarky up there at the top, but I don't think we're done with all of this today. Just fewer ads on TV. So
yeah, the ads will at least reduce themselves until we start the next election cycle in December or January. I'm not sure, but
I do think that anybody that mentions the 2028 election after I mention it now, it should be a crime punishable. So, all right, off the election stuff, on to investing. Here is our weekly reminder that Portillo's is They should be, but they're not a sponsor of the session. But the bottle on the left is a departure. It was provided very graciously by Ralph Futch of Colorado. And now, for those of you out there that think Ken and I may need an intervention, please don't worry about us. But that probably is a pretty good bottle. Are you familiar, Ken?
Well, I'm not familiar, Mark, and I'm questioning whether it's an actual bottle or not. I know that I'm being ultra suspicious, but I think that I can probably create a similar picture myself in some of my AI things here, and I'm going to make an attempt to do so when we get finished with the poll session. So
Well,
I'm not saying the picture is an AI, but Portillo Malbec is something you can buy from buywinesonline.com.
okay.
so Matt went and did a search. Okay.
Personally, I would trust Ralph like a brother. So I don't think he's out there, Ken.
Well, then we're pronouncing it wrong. Then if it's real, because if it's a Malbec, then that's Argentinian, and it should be Portillo.
Portillo.
If we're going to pronounce it correctly, yeah, it can be Portillo. Yeah.
All right. All right. Well, we're getting way too stuck on this stuff. That is the stock price of Portillo's hot dogs on the right. And I was reminded by one of our longtime investors that every time I refer to my cost basis, I'm anchoring. So he's just reminding me not to anchor and not to think about that. We're supposed to think about going forward. And by the way, I believe Portillo's was at $14.50 today. I got an alert. So
Oh my goodness.
it's definitely headed in the right direction, and Kevin Gologly will be pleased to hear that. All right.
That's enough said. Keep going. Yeah.
Here is our global disclaimer. No recommendation whatsoever about the investing is intended here. It's an educational demonstration. We are quite literally trying to share the lessons learned in nearly 8 decades of discovering opportunities and analyzing those opportunities and owning the ones that make sense for as long as it makes sense to do so. It's up to you to do your own homework with respect to any investment decision. If we're talking about a company, we will try to remember to disclose that we own it. I do own some Portillo's from the previous slide, but we assume that you're smart enough to form your own opinions, make your own decisions. If you'd like copies of these slides, or if you have follow-up topics or questions, our 2 email addresses are down there at the bottom of the page. Send us a note. We're going to cover some questions later on. People just send us questions. We'll cover them and share them later on in the session.
Well, we're going from beautiful pictures of pumpkins, Mark. My son-in-law and my granddaughter were off in the field this last Saturday shooting pumpkins with a trebuchet, shooting them 200 and 300 yards away, and it only cost 25 cents a pumpkin to make the shot. So
Excellent. And
she brought back wonderful stories. She had a wonderful time.
I will try to resist the urge to put up a picture next week of the pumpkins going soft on our front porch, and they kind of snag and get ugly. All right, let's start with the groundhog. We're going to go a couple different directions here. The groundhog update for today. Those prices are as of this morning. We have had a little bit of a relaxation, a little drop in some of our key companies like Ardelyx and NVIDIA. But and Jim Gallagher has actually dropped back below 2.5 million.
Oh my goodness. It's a race again.
He's probably not too disturbed by that. But a couple points came off the market in the last week. Ken, what do you think?
I haven't kept track like I should have, but it's been 12 weeks now, and I have been keeping track for the last 12 bull sessions, and the top 5 have barely changed for the last 12 weeks. So they seem to be really nestled in there. Investment Club of America is new to that group up there at 1.35 up in that general area. And Bauer City has stayed pretty consistent at their 1.35 as well. So, it's probably written in stone what the top is going to be, but that middle is certainly changing around a lot. Every single week, people are moving up and down 8, 10, 12 positions.
Well, I did notice that Keith Meter went from 21 to 9th, and he is a member of that Four Corners Club at number 14. There's our friend, the Melback kid. Ralph Futch is right there at number 17.
You better watch out, Kim. The cool kids are after you next. Okay.
That's okay. I'm up to number 10. And remember what I said, if I could be in the top 10 kind of consistently, I'm happy with myself.
All right, and I did sneak numbers 41 and 42 onto the list. Janet, because she attends that Wednesday morning breakfast session, and she's also one of the sources of the idea for that SPRY nasal application of epinephrine that we've been kicking around. It's one of the small company stocks we'll be talking about. And no list is complete when Herb Lemcool is right on the edge. So we snuck him in there for us, Ken.
That's wonderful because Herb's quite a stock picker, and he's pretty much responsible for number 11 up there. So he has a couple of entries on the list, and they always do really well in any contest we look at in mid-Michigan here. So,
and Ken, I
kudos to Herb.
Do have to point out that I did it again. I mentioned that there were no celebrity groundhogs, no italicized entries on the list last week, and as you
have to bring them back, right?
I had to bring them back. I jinxed it. Einhorn. All right, here's a quick look at the stock market as measured by the value line arithmetic average. The market has been kind of bouncing around pretty close to that long-term trend line, which means that stock prices are generally pretty fairly valued. The average return right now on a stock study is right around 9%, and pretty unspectacular. We've been locked in at that 40% level, according to the value line forecast, those goldish or yellow entries on the chart, for a while now. All right, shall we keep rolling?
Well, as long as it stays on that line of expectations, Mark, I don't think any of us should be complaining. Yeah, it's doing quite well.
I don't like to see it to go too far away from that in either direction. All right, here is our performance perspectives. Again, just kind of keeping things in perspective. Any of the stocks mentioned are among our 10 most widely followed companies. And the one we really want to spend a little bit of time with is the Tin Cup demonstration portfolio, which checks in, and that's actually been running since 1994. I'm pretty sure it was an inspiration based on some comments made by North Carolina's own Dan Hess. Dan Hess was is a very strong member of the educational community down in North Carolina for a long time. And he basically inspired the Tin Cup, and it's been a lot of fun. So since that time frame, what we have basically done is taken and put the maximum amount that we could on a monthly basis into the best looking stock that we could find, much like a 401k. And the result is 16.3%, and that's beaten the market by 5.6%. That doesn't sound a lot. So let's take a look at it this way.
I think we should make the point, Mark, that the contributions on a monthly basis have changed as the laws have changed, correct?
Absolutely. They've gone up. They started
right.
They started around $1,200 a month, and they're now up to $2,500 something a month.
So this is a pretty good simulation of what somebody could have done in a good 30-year career. If you started back in 94 and 95, we're in a good 30-year career right now, and that begins to mark the retirement point for some folks that work in jobs where it's 30 and out. So, if you would have followed the rules and put the money into the IRA like everybody tells you to do first before you start any other kind of investing, look where you could have been today with just that contribution, period.
Yeah, and I think this really, because again, we try to make the point that 5.6% might not sound like a lot, but it's huge. If you had invested that just into the shaded one down below, the Wilshire 5000 or one of those indices, like most of the experts on TV will tell you to do, nothing wrong with that. I mean, an 8, 9, 12% return, those are all good. But if you can get it up to 16, it's spectacular. And that's basically what you're looking at on this page. Who out there wants 4.8 million versus 2.4 million?
Yeah, and remember, Mark's not talking about a 5% return. He's talking about a 5% relative return. Back your eyes over 2 columns and notice that that's a 16.3% annualized total return.
Absolutely. So we'll keep that in mind as we go forward. This is the actual return right here, but we're only, and I'm putting it in air quotes, Ken, beating the market by 5 to 6%. That produces that differential. It's hard for the human brain, for any of us, to imagine that massive difference from that small difference in relative return. But it's real. So a lot of good, clean fun. Here is the current portfolio that is actually providing the current situation, 4.6 million. You see down here at the bottom. A lot of community favorites. Some of the companies fairly obscure. Ken insists on there being a regional bank. This is a pretty good one. Not as sexy as some of the ones he comes up with, but we'll take it. And a number of, at least this community favorites on the list.
SFBS sits right in the middle of the Wolves portfolio, Mark. That's my primary original club that I belong to, and SFBS is one of the linchpins of that portfolio. It's a good 6-8% of that portfolio, so it's not a bad bank by any stretch of the imagination.
And we, in our family portfolio, we probably own at least 6 of these, so we are honoring our own cooking. These are sorted from top to bottom. So as we're looking to put to invest the cash that's in the portfolio into one of the positions, this is the potential accumulation zone. And down here towards the bottom, none of those really qualify, but that's where you would find your potential selling targets or for selling consideration. There really aren't any right now. I'm going to talk though about InMode a little bit here. Anything else on this slide you want to point out, Ken?
Well, I don't know if Bonnie is with us today, but she was certainly with us on Saturday, and she kept asking about the banks and how much of a portfolio they should occupy, in our opinion. And I think this portfolio right here is a well-crafted, well-thought-out portfolio. It has the requisite 16 plus or minus 4 stocks in it, and nothing is really too big a piece. And there might be maybe one stock that's maybe a little bit on the smallish side, but I understand why it's on the smallish side at the moment. And when you have that going on, if you have 10% in banks, then you probably have enough, and that's when this one has. So I think that the way that this has been put together, the diversity of the portfolio, all of the size things, the small, the medium, the large, they're all being represented here. And I think it's a portfolio you could look at and say to yourself, I'm really pleased that it can accomplish a par of 13%. And that's at the moment beating the market by just about 4, right? Because the market's right around 9 right now. My par is. So we'd love to push that up just a little bit, but when the market's doing really, really well, keeping it in that sweet spot is a very difficult thing to do, and this one's staying within hailing distance.
Yep. So it's actually a coincidence that the company here, Nice, is going to be compared to InMode. This is basically a challenge, just creating a dashboard with 2 stocks in it so that we can look at them side by side. $100 invested into each one would stack up like this. Nice has been a subject of a number of presentations. It's one of our best small companies. I gave a presentation last night for the Washington, D.C., Maryland crew out there. And Kim presented, was it just last month at the roundtable, Kim? You presented Nice?
I think it was 2 months ago.
2 months ago. So it's been on our radar screens for a while. It's prominent in the roundtable portfolio. I do own shares of Nice myself in the family portfolio.
I do too.
So one of the things that we have been concerned about is the elephant in the room. Their very accomplished CEO at Nice resigned after over 20 years. He's kind of a lifer and has been around for quite a while with the company. Very, very well regarded, but he decided he wanted to go golfing come January. And they did announce fairly recently that his successor has been chosen, as you can see from that inset there. And again, the point to be made, this company has been firing on all cylinders operationally. The stock price has been languishing for 2 to 3 years. And if you're not overly concerned about what's going on in Israel, I think it will pass in some way, shape, or form. But InMode is also there, and they have the not even sure how to put it. They basically are slowing down growth-wise. They have some formidable competition, and 3 of their executives were, rumor has it, they were asked to leave fairly recently. 3 of their top C-suite executives. Can you shed any more light on that, Ken, or you want to just let it ride as that?
There's not enough light to shed, Mark, other than the fact that the 3 folks were basically in charge of the North America market. They had been dealt a pretty free hand to do what they thought needed to be done, and the CEO turned out evidently not to be very happy with the results coming out of North America. There's been rumors swirling around, but none of the rumors have any nobody's affirmed any of those rumors so that we can say without a doubt that it was happening. But there's been talk of accounting irregularities, channel stuffing, some various other kinds of things. The CEO of InMode has made it quite clear that he's going to keep a real tight watch on North America as he appoints the new heads of North America, and it's going to be one of his primary responsibilities to make sure that North America gets back in line with the rest of the world as far as growth is concerned and everything. So there's definitely some shenanigans going on of some sort, and they're keeping it pretty close to the vest at the moment, Mark.
All right, so I mean, faced with the choice between these 2 companies, both of which are in the fog of war zone over there. Nice has just a very compelling picture. You can go back and listen to Kim's commentary at the roundtable from a couple months ago. I gave the presentation last night. In a nutshell, what these guys are it's a consulting firm that basically helps companies with their call centers and their client engagement processes to basically optimize them. They're also branching out into law enforcement and security type projects. I do believe that this appointment is going to be going to benefit some of those expansion efforts. But just as a case in point that we made last night, they actually serve 10 out of the top 10 health insurance companies in the Fortune 500. So, and they do that all across the board. They have an incredible retention record of their customers. And as Pat Donnelly and Ken Kavula and several others have reminded us, they were doing artificial intelligence before it was cool. And that's what they are basically renowned for. This reminds us that we are looking at this company near multi-year highs in their return forecast. So the decision for Tin Cup this month is going to be to switch out InMode, take the money that's been invested either from dividends or the cash infusion into the 401k, switch out InMode, and replace it with Nice. So we'll be doing that. Any other comments or questions, Ken?
Well, I think that you can use the information from the previous slide, Mark, as kind of like a stock comparison chart. And for me, the key metric is the circle that you have up there on that chart. It's the growth. And when you have one growing at 12 and one growing at 4, I think that's a wide enough gap to make a switch. I would never have made a switch like this if the pars were as close as they were and the growth was within a couple of points of each other. But when that growth span becomes something like, 200% more than the smallest one, then I think that it's a really good idea to do what you're doing.
Now, I was asked offline by somebody that said, aren't you concerned about a change in leadership situation? The answer is sure, I'm concerned. I'm going to be monitoring as a shareholder of the company. Yeah, anytime there's a change like that, it's a concern, but sometimes those changes can also be quite bolstering or even nudge forward in progress in certain other areas. So, yeah.
Dwight wants to know, does NICE compete with Salesforce.com? And I don't think it directly competes. I think they're doing some similarities in various places, but for the most part, I think NICE is pretty focused. And I think that even in Morningstar, you'll find that Morningstar has placed them in different industries.
Yeah, this is definitely more of a software / management consulting firm. In fact, I'm pretty sure that I'm not 100% on this, but I think Salesforce might be one of the companies they actually partner with as they develop solutions for clients. Not 100%, but I'd be surprised if they weren't. When you see a list of who they partner with and who they are clients of, it's really pretty amazing. And Kim shared that during the roundtable. All right, so we'll go ahead and make that change. Just a quick look at a really quick Sweet 16 for this month. Typically, I go out and look for the top companies with respect to quality and the return forecast, but we're coming in right on the heels of our best small company selection. So I just ran this screen one more time. Many of those companies are on our best small company list. Others didn't make it for a variety of reasons. For example, this one, because it's a limited partnership, we just prefer to leave that alone. And some of these were really close to making the list. And like I said, there's several on here that are. And Ken is a happy camper because Preferred Bank is up there at the top. And Axos too. 2 regional banks on here, Ken. How about that, huh?
And they both made our list. And since it's a list of 22 banks, gives us about 10% in the banking industry. And I'm happy with that. I don't know where I've developed the label of Mr. Bank, but I do like banks in my portfolios, but I like a lot of other stocks as well. So
yeah, well, there was Joe Smith way back in the glory days, and then there was he who I want to buy a bank, McManus. So you're just following a lineage, Ken.
Okay, maybe.
All right, those are some good studies there. All right, we thought we'd spend just a moment reminding that we did do our session on Saturday. This is really so apropos. We ran out of time. We always do. There's just so many companies to look at. We looked at a large number. We again want to thank those of you out there in the community that helped out with that effort. A number of the companies that made the list were inspired by notes or commentary from you guys. So thank you so much. Just real quickly, here's our performance over the last 10 years. As most of you here on the call know, Ken forbids me from sharing this information too often, so I get to do it here. In 24, we actually did outperform 42 to 37, as we'll show on the next slide. So we are now beating the Wilshire 5000 8 out of 10 years. And that is not AI over here, Ken. That's a real bottle of
that one I know is real, Mark. Yeah, I'll give you that. I know that one's real. Okay. I've gone out looking for that particular bottle.
All right. And just to repeat, these are the companies we presented on Saturday, spent a little bit of time talking about each one. And the winner and taking over first place on the last day, literally on Halloween, was NAPCO Security. That was an inspiration by Ty Hughes a year ago. Technoglass was almost the top company for 2 years in a row. And the one that's shaded there was actually purchased in April by Johnson & Johnson. So that's why that one looks different. But pretty good performance from top to bottom. And as others have pointed out, you do see an element of the rule of 5 on here, with those top ones up at the top actually doubling in price, and then those ones at the very bottom being a little extra disappointing compared to the pack. But overall, the ones right down the middle were pretty solid. Anything else here, Ken?
No, this was a pretty decent list and a pretty decent year. The only really really disappointment was Celsius Holdings.
And we left Celsius off this year's list, and you just know they're going to go gangbusters here.
That'll be the reason. Yeah.
That'll be it. You know, the word is out. Well, here's our list of 20 companies that we went over on Saturday morning. And you can see that Preferred Bank is up at the top of the list along with Nice. And again, I think a pretty good list of companies. It'll be interesting to see how it goes. There's a couple at the bottom. ARS Pharmaceuticals. We would encourage you to take a closer look. That is an intense speculation on the company that's come up with a product that replaces EpiPens and replaces them with nasal spray for allergic reactions, most applicable to, in most cases, children in schools. And we think it's an interesting one to study and take a look at. It is absolutely an early stage speculation. Underline that, put it in red. Make sure you understand that. And then we're going to spend a moment here talking about these nuclear companies that have caught Ken's attention here over the last month or so. Anything else here, sir?
Last 5 or 6 months, actually.
Mm-hmm.
And that NUKZ is not a stock. That's a fund, an ETF. So be careful when you're trying to look at it. You can buy it just like a stock, but I think we're going to explain a little bit about how we can get some numbers attached to it pretty quickly here.
Well, I won't spend the same amount of time that I spent on Saturday, but Ken kept coming with these companies, SMR and OKLO. Some of them are not just pre-earnings, some of them are pre-sales. So it's been a little bit crazy. I wanted to kind of talk him down or talk him back from that a little bit. And we basically went with this. And the reason we went with this was both companies are in there. This is that ETF. And we get the added feature of, you may remember this, Ken, 6 or 8 months ago, Herb Lemkool strongly suggested uranium companies. And the top uranium company in the world is Cameco. So they're in this list also. Centrus is another company that is directly involved in the processing of uranium fuel. But because there's a pretty high concentration of these companies, and Ken, I mean, I'll turn it over to you, but I've literally been sitting here for 6 weeks hoping that these didn't take off and get away from us. And they sort of did a little. We just hope it's not too bad.
Yeah, it's been a wonderful last month or 6 weeks. I happen to own NewScale. SMR is the ticker. I don't own Oklo, and I wish I did. Vistra, Mark, is one of the best performing stocks in the Standard & Poor's in the last 6 months, Vistra Core. And you would really want to take a look at that. We don't want to give the impression that this ETF is made up of all small companies. It's not. Witness the fact that 3% of the portfolio is in GE Vernova, and that's anything but a small company when you look at it carefully. I happen to own GE Vernova because of my GE holdings originally, and I've added to Vernova since it spun off. It's been doing extremely well as one of these 2 spin-offs from the original GE. So there's a lot to like on here. I really like Constellation Energy also, Mark. That's been on one of my watch lists for the last maybe 8 or 10 or 12 months, because originally I was looking for companies that were going to just directly provide power to data centers. And that's what led me to these small modular reactors, and then led me to companies like Oklo and NewScale. I also have a bias against electrical motor vehicles, and I think there's more efficient ways to refuel a new generation of vehicles to move away from petroleum products, but at the same time, maybe move towards something that doesn't need a complete revamp of the entire infrastructure in order to make it happen. And maybe move to something that you can refuel in a couple of minutes rather than in an hour or so. So there's my soapbox that I stood up on, and now I'll get down off of again. I do notice Rolls-Royce down there at some of the biggest holdings in this fund as well, Mark.
Yeah, any GE, ABB, Siemens, Rolls-Royce, they're all involved in the type of equipment that services and stuff. And in fact, Betsy Wills's presentation on Powell Industries actually comes in here also, because some of that equipment on the lower left and all over the place are involved. But this has all happened probably a whole lot faster than anybody would have expected. I mean, some of these repowering projects for data centers and the Googles and Amazons and all that stuff that's going on right now, they are being fast tracked and regulatory approvals are being expedited. And the pictures on the lower right give you an idea. We're not talking about these 1,200 megawatt, the size of a city block reactors that sprung up in the 1970s, early 1980s. These are actually, as is shown right here, that one of these units fits on a trailer truck. So it's a different ball game. It's not the thing I find compelling here, Ken, is that NewScale is transitioning through, starting with existing approved technology, and then they're moving on to advanced technologies. But the stuff that they are, currently under contract to do is something that the U.S. Navy's been doing since 1945, roughly.
Well, and the dream for these SMRs, Mark, is to retrofit coal-powered power plants that are being shut down all over the country. We just drove past a huge one over on the western side of Michigan that is being mothballed up near Holland, Michigan, being mothballed, a huge, huge power plant where if you brought in some of these SMRs and retrofitted the plant with them as the power source rather than coal, you'd have clean energy, and you'd have it in a situation that it wasn't going to cost $1 billion to rebuild the whole project that's already sitting there and going to go to waste if we don't find a way to reuse it.
Yeah,
so there's so many things going on. Go on, Matt.
Sorry, importantly, you already have the electrical distribution at that location, right? Which is
right.
A big problem for wind farms or solar, which nobody wants in the middle of a city, so they have to get out of there. So you can plug it right into the distribution network, saves quite a bit of steps and quite a bit of regulatory time too, as opposed to having to get the land to put all those wires on.
I know the common knowledge out there is that Democrats don't work with Republicans at all, but the Democrats, the Republicans got together and passed a very large bill to fast track some of this technology that involves these small modular reactors, that involves hydrogen gas and creating hydrogen gas out of one of our most abundant resources, which is methane. And methane is nothing more than one atom of carbon and 4 atoms of hydrogen. And ideally, you should be able to break that apart and get pure hydrogen and pure carbon. And that's one of the things that these companies is actually doing. They actually have a working plant where that's happening right now. And they have markets for both the pure hydrogen and the solid carbon that precipitates out of the reaction. So you can tell that I'm really excited about this technology, and I'm willing to do some speculation in my stock hunting. I won't, I'll say with a big smile on my face that I'd rather in the last 6 weeks have owned SMR than ARDX. So
oh, that's cruel. That's cruel. Well, in full disclosure, I said I was afraid this one might get away from us. I did buy SMR about 6 weeks ago, and it's basically doubled. OKLO, I wasn't brave enough to go after, and that's only up like 177%. So this is an interesting area. Like I said, I was hoping it wouldn't get away from us. Let's go ahead and switch to one of the questions we got from the audience. How do you think about one of these? First of all, my first motivation was to not invest an entire position into OKLO or SMR, but really wanted to, be informed and aware of this subject. So what you see here is the exchange traded fund, Range Nuclear Renaissance. It's an exchange traded fund. The ticker symbol is NUKZ, NUKZ. and the tickers are on the left. You can decode them on the right. And what we basically do with any fund is a dashboard. So you're looking at a dashboard of these. Some of these we don't, the lines that are blank are companies that are not yet covered. So if they can be covered, we will be adding them to coverage. For example, just this morning, I put VST into coverage, Vistra. You can see that over here on the right. That happens to be a large nuclear utility headquartered in Irving, Texas. The old Texas Utilities is kind of the centerpiece, I believe, of Vistra. And they are quite accomplished in the nuclear field. So that one has been filled in. We'll fill in the ones that we can. We can obviously fill in Vernova. This company here is actually Oklo, this up here. It's kind of confusing as to what they're going to be known as going forward. And Ken likes to point out that that's a really smart guy that's involved in that company.
He's the chairman of the board of this company of NewScale. And when you pull up an SSG and your SSG Plus, you don't even get a green line, let alone a blue line, but you do get a single dot. Okay, so if the lack of a blue line scares you, don't pull up either OCLO or ALCC. Don't pull either one of them up, but they've certainly been active in the last 6 weeks as far as price is concerned.
So you guys out there in the audience, you know that I'm going to need therapy after receiving these stock submissions from Ken with OKLO having no green line, no blue line. And I was kind of concerned about him for a while, but I get where he's going on this one. So we'll have some fun with it. So this will fill out. We'll take a closer look at this one, obviously, within the next month or so. But this is how you can actually look at a fund. Just think of it as your investment club. So this will be Ken's nuclear investment club on the side.
And then basically we're looking at the numbers and the averages down below to tell us the behavior of the entire fund. We think that about 50 or 55% is enough of the assets to know about. And here we're actually showing almost 84% of the assets. So the more data we can now fill into these blank lines, the better read we're going to get on proof and projected return. The only thing we have to remind ourselves is that so much of this list is full of speculation that all of the numbers for these speculative stocks are nothing more than speculation themselves. So we're keeping it to, I think Mr. Nicholson suggested that if you think you know what you're doing, you could put somewhere between 15 and 25% of your portfolio into non-traditional holdings. And we'll certainly label this as a non-traditional holding for our small company list, right, Mark?
Absolutely. And keep in mind that you do have a bit of a hedge here. You've got General Electric, Vernova, you've got Honeywell, Lockheed Martin, Dominion, Mastech, Fluor, Duke Energy. So you have Emerson Electric. You have some real stalwarts, some established companies on this list also. All right, so we'll come back and take a closer look at this one after I do some of my homework. A little bit more to do. So Ken, I thought we'd tackle a couple of questions here. This is one that came in, just wanted to describe, talk us through what you're looking at on Manifest when it comes to one of these boxes, which are known as Chronicles. And one of the things I will point you to is you can actually go to on the right-hand side of the homepage, click on Help, roll down to Glossary, and you can look up a word like Chronicle. And actually, you can also, on many of these, you'll find a link for more information, but there's a definition. And we basically look at this as it's a time series representation of the company over time. These are like monthly snapshots of the company with respect to their price, quality, and their return, their projected return. So Ken, what would you counsel here, or how do you think of Chronicles?
Well, if you're just starting to look at Chronicles, I would focus just on a few of it's kind of a busy slide when you first look at it, but as you begin to work with it, it kind of sorts itself out. First of all, Kurt, our tech guy in Manifest, has done a wonderful job so that as you take your cursor in and scooch it over lines or bars and everything, some of those little boxes appear to give you values that you can read sort of by looking at the scales, but you can read exactly by doing your cursor over the top of some of the data. I would start, when you're looking at a chronicle, I start with the blue line. And the blue line is quality. And when I see that line moving in a general downward direction, that gives me pause. This is T. Rowe Price, which used to be one of the highest quality companies in the entire database. And over the last, let's say 10, 15 quarters, T. Rowe has taken a little bit of a hit in quality. It's still a high quality company, but it's not as high a quality company as it used to be. I think most of us understand that T. Rowe is involved with a lot of competition, especially from exchange traded funds. And I don't know if they've actually taken the plunge and created any ETFs themselves. Do you, Mark?
Yeah, they have a few. They have a smattering of them, so they're in the game.
But I would watch that quality, and if it declines beneath the 80 mark, and that scale for quality is over there on the extreme left, the first scale, but if it declines beneath that 80, that would be a warning signal for me. The next thing I look at then is the red line, and that red line there is par. That's the scale on the right-hand side. And when I'm thinking about buying something, I would like to buy it when the par is somewhere near a maybe 2-year or 1-year high. The time for me to maybe have been looking at T. Rowe Price was back in July of 2022 or August of 2022. In that time frame, I do note that the par has stayed relatively consistent since about October 2022. I don't see any huge upswings or downswings, so it might not be the worst time to buy it, but at the same time, I don't think it's a particularly opportune moment either, and I'd have to compare it to other companies maybe that I was interested in as well. I think if you start by looking at just those two lines, you begin to get a fairly decent idea of what's happening with the stock. When you feel that you understand the blue line and the red line, then I move to the green bars. And the green bars are basically talking about price. And that scale is over on the left-hand side right there. And I can see that the price has kind of remained, and remember, this is a snapshot once a month, going back now for maybe a year and a half or 2 years. The price for this stock has remained relatively consistent. There is no obvious place where you might have jumped in, except maybe in July, August of 23, that might have been a slight opportunity to jump in as far as price is concerned. But this is all data. It's all happened. There's no projections on the Chronicle at all. And if you're really, really into it, you can look at that shaded pink or that shaded red behind the green bars. And that shaded red is relative return. And you can shut any of these off or turn them back on by clicking on the various things. I usually click the relative return off unless I'm going to focus on the relative return. It does make the graph look a little bit easier on the eyes. But for the most part, Mark has another slide that I think is really interesting that puts the relative return in perspective. Why don't we go to that slide, Mark?
Yeah, we're going to take a look at that next. I do think it's interesting to watch the roundtable participants. A moment in time like this one back here that Ken mentioned, I don't know if we did or not, but it would not have been unusual to find that the roundtable people are interested because of that peak, that bump up in projected return back at that time frame. So let's go on to the next one because it's a related question. And I think it's a great question. Again, as you're trying to understand some of what's going on here. And it is kind of a math question. Why do they move together, or they seem to move together and in the same direction? I think that's a bit of a coincidence. It's not always true, but I thought we would start with the definition down on the lower left. A lot of the time when we're talking about relative return here, and you'll hear us mention it many times, that performance perspective chart or whatever, we're talking about historical actual performance. How did the investment do versus the market? And that's what the relative return refers to. And on these particular chronicles, this relative return that's being mentioned is actually a projected relative return. The math is basically, what is your stock? What is the projected annual return for your stock minus markr, the median projected return for all companies, and that's what this brownish or pinkish area actually represents. So keep in mind that projected word is important. So that's what the question really is probably related to. And then down to this concept, which is one of our core concepts. We basically think that a stock becomes attractive when it's 5 percentage points a bit better than the market. On this particular chronicle, on this type of chart, when the stock price is actually between, when that projected relative return is in that green box, it's in the sweet spot. So it really is kind of an interesting look at a company like NICE. Remember, we showed that NICE, the stock price has languished for a couple of years. Notice that it has crept into and basically stayed inside the green box. So it does give you a pretty quick visual trigger about the company being in the sweet spot. Does that cover it, Ken, or how would you put this?
I think it covers it, and it might help us account for the fact that a NICE stock price, I don't know if languish is the right word, because it stayed relatively consistent. But if you look carefully at the price bars, and if you graph them so that you can see them attached to the sales lines and to the earnings lines, you'll notice that the company got quite a bit ahead of itself during the pandemic as far as price was concerned. Sales were rising, but not nearly as fast as price was rising. And I think that's a normal reaction of the market to kind of draw back from a company that's become a little bit overvalued and kind of let the stock just kind of sit there, not punish it, but not give it a premium either. Until things kind of get back in sync with each other. And that's why we feel that so strongly that NICE is a pretty decent investment thesis right now, not only for what it does and how much it sells and all those kind of things, but for the price being relatively consistent over that 3-year period when sales and earnings continued to grow.
Absolutely. And you see the kind of the general uptick in the projected return. If you kind of put a trend through that projected return line, again, that's equivalent to section 5 of your stock selection guide. So it's actually risen to multi-year highs as we showed previously. Good stuff. All right, on to the next question. This is about one of the better performers in the portfolio for last year for our best small companies for 2024, and it has been retained in the best small companies for 2025. And Ken, I think you're on the hot speed. This might have been one of my companies. Is this one of mine?
I own MedPace. No, and I think I presented MedPace as well. I own MedPace in a couple of clubs, and I'm going to give a 2-word answer to this. It's the same answer that I give in beginners classes when beginners that they get so excited about finding news for a company that they dig down really deep. And my 2-word answer about these lawsuits, these lawyers out there looking to create class actions for some perceived or real malfeasance by the company, I give the answer of most of that is just noise. That's all it is. And then I go on to say in a beginner's class that I don't know of any really high quality company that doesn't have a dozen or more law firms chasing it, trying to set up a class action for some reason or the other. Mark has another way of handling it with the Wall Street Journal. And why don't you tell us about that, Mark?
Well, yeah, the image on the left is from the Y Charts news feed, so you can see that, well, every day another law firm jumps on the bandwagon and says that they're suing for some type of malfeasance or something. It's not that I ignore this stuff. I mean, you want to be aware that these type of things are a normal course of business operations for a number of companies. These guys are in contract research for pharmaceuticals. They're going to have situations, actionable situations. So that is reality. But what I will do, I'm not kidding. When I see this on the left, I go to my Wall Street Journal subscription, go to the company, and then if you click this box, it says significant news only. You notice that none of the class action stuff remains on the page. What does show up here, Ken, which bothers me a little bit, is this one. They actually had some missed targets for their third quarter reports that came in right before we selected our best small companies, and might put a little bit of a ding in them for a while. So this is the only one that really sticks around that's significant enough to pay much attention to. So you might want to take a look at that one, Ken. And
Mark, I will point out that second article, which I've read a couple times, is a really interesting. It's from Barron's, and if you get a chance to read that second article right there, it does a nice job of explaining that MedPace, because it works so closely with biotechs and helping them navigate the waters of the process that allows them to get drugs approved. And the article does a wonderful, clear job of explaining why MedPace, since it has to follow the lead from the biotechs, why it is languishing at the moment. There's not a lot coming in the front end from the biotechs at the moment, and a lot of it has to do, and I'm taking a little bit of a leap right now, but a lot of it, according to a lot of the things you read, has to do with the switchover from traditional searching for drugs to begin to use large language models. That's another way of saying we're getting AI involved and we're trying to locate new drug candidates with some different tools. And there's a learning curve associated with that. And it's slowed down the number of possibilities moving into the pipelines, not dramatically. And in fact, our expert in the field at our last roundtable suggested that AI was going to increase the number of drug trials out there because it was going to quicken the pace of candidates for drug companies to use in trials. But right now, the learning curve is such that that pipeline has slowed down just a little bit, and that has slowed down MedPace's business. Nobody expects this to continue, Mark. Nobody expects the slowdown to continue.
Well, I will tell you that this literally is Hugh McManus's day job. That's who Ken is referring to. He does contract research manufacturing for a number of pharmaceutical firms. He's worked in the industry for decades, and his comments would align very closely with Ken's, and very optimistic and very affirmative about what AI is going to do, especially with some of the smaller firms trying to develop solutions. So he was quite positive about the entire environment and not terribly concerned. This probably even reaches the point where it becomes an opportunity to accumulate, in his language. Okay.
Yeah, our friend Kevin in the audience has reminded everybody that when you go to your Wall Street Journal, if you have a subscription, you will get citations for Investors Business Daily or Barron's or one or two other journals, and they're all in the same company. All these publications come under the umbrella now of the Wall Street Journal. So don't be surprised when you see a Barron's citation when you thought you were searching Wall Street Journal. they're in the same company.
It's pretty handy. It's got increasingly more handy all the time. All right. So with that, we're not going to go into this today. Here's the current Buttonwood Bulls portfolio. We will be giving it a full raking across the coals either next week or the following week. Ken, we still have to decide. But we will, I nominate next week for now, for lack of a better time frame. But I do think Vertra is going to come under the microscope, even though it's got this relatively high return. We'll see.
I would also like to take a look at Diageo, Mark, and only because of its growth. I just want to make sure that a company growing at 6% fits in this portfolio. So okay. I would like to look at it.
Kevin Galogly presented Brown-Forman last night at their session, and it's a very industry-wide slowing when it comes to these type of beverages. So they really do face some interesting challenges. So yeah, I say we take a look at both.
Understood, right.
All right, here's our reminder that every session, whether it's roundtables, bull sessions, or in the case of our best small company from Saturday morning, they are archived here for you to take a look at. If you see something you like, subscribe, like the video, tell your friends. These are free, and they can help somebody become familiar with what we do and how much fun we're having. Keep in mind that these roundtables, we have a 17% rate of return on the companies that we have presented since 2010. So that one is, we are trying to bring actionable ideas. Now, they're not investment recommendations, as we covered with the disclaimer, but as they've turned out to be pretty, they have turned out to be some pretty solid ideas over time.
And I think we're on solid ground when we indicate, Mark, that we're giving you recommendations for your to-study list.
Mm-hmm.
We're asking you to take some of these ideas and study the heck out of them. And when you find something that doesn't match what we've said, let us know. Help us out, because we can't possibly be experts on every single stock that we speak about. And sometimes we're misinformed, or sometimes we need you to set us straight when it comes to a particular stock that we're looking at.
So if a year from now MedPace is doing really well, it was my idea. If it's not doing really well, it was Ken's idea. Really simple. All right, here's some other stuff we're going to be looking at, coming attractions, and not going to spend any time on it here today, but we might talk about some of these podcasts. We are going to be talking about Buttonwood Bulls and a little broader look at investing in the future. And I'll leave us with this slide today with the election going on. A reminder from the Motley Fool that maybe it is time to stay calm, find a really excellent company that appears to be on sale, and buy it. So,
Mark, I think we have a great possible topic from Steve Emmerich in the questions box.
Okay.
He's reminding me that NVIDIA is going to be replacing Intel, and Sherwin-Williams, one of my favorite stocks, is going to be replacing Dow Chemical in the Dow 30. And we might take a look at what happens to a stock as it gets taken out of a major index or as it's added to a major index. That might be something really interesting to kind of look into.
Agreed. Thank you for the suggestion, Steve, Mr. MRI guy. And the thing up on the upper left is certainly true for many of us, although we do find great hope and energy in all of you and in our extended community. It's a lot of fun. And then I just had to put pictured rocks up there one more time, Ken. That's, believe it or not, Lake Superior, for those of you that are not familiar. Normally, Lake Superior looks like an ocean with about a 50-mile-an-hour wind blowing across it. And that's just a pretty peaceful thing, a reminder that every once in a while investing can be just that wonderful and peaceful.
I guess I could also say, Mark, that this picture could just as easily have been somewhere on the California coast. It's a gorgeous, gorgeous picture, and people don't realize the scope of the Great Lakes, especially Lake Superior, if you don't live near them and operate your life around them. Oh, they're just magnificent.
You just inspired me to find a picture of Morro Bay. one of the best days of our lives as husband and wife. We spent, Wendy and I spent the day at Morro Bay in California. I'm going to go find that picture, Ken.
Okay, next bull session, we'll take a look at it.
Okay.
Oh,
All right,
you can share my picture I sent of Maui.
We did. Well, last week.
Well, I wasn't there. That's why.
We got you covered. We
I'll have to
even
go
gave
see
you
that. I'll have
credit.
to go watch.
Dean would like us to just mention that Ernie Marcus, longtime CEO of Home Depot, departed the earth at age 95 yesterday, and it just he had a wonderful life, and he created quite a company. So rest in peace.
Yeah, he's created a lot of wealth. In fact, our dear friend and colleague, Cy Lynch, has been an investor in Home Depot since the IPO, still holds the shares. Interesting. Well, thank you, Bernie. God bless you, man.
Well, I'm going to say good afternoon to everybody, and good afternoon to you, Mark, and I'll talk to you again. We have to talk about next Tuesday's bull session. I might be on the road. We'll have to see.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, I've got some travel coming up too, but with that, happy trails out there, everybody. Get out there and vote for the candidate of your choice, and we'll see you next week.
Bye-bye, everyone.